In this talk, I present two views on improvisation, the idealist view and the materialist view. The idealist view treats musical mediums as external to musical work, while the materialist view treats musical medium as one of the constituents of the work. I will first present the problem by discussing the traditional ways jazz musicians bought and sold transcriptions, and compare them with the new ways some YouTube channels share the transcriptions. Afterward, I will discuss how Jeff Pressing's use of the term referent shows his idealist view on improvisation. I will then use the conceptual metaphor theory to describe how musical work is conceptualized as an ideal object. I will end by discussing what a materialist view of the referent might look like, and propose a different metaphor, sound as water, to help conceptualize my idea. If you type into YouTube search box a famous jazz musician's name with the word transcription, chances are you'll find a list of transcription videos done by YouTube content creators. Some of these content creators seem to receive ad revenues from their videos, and some seek a more stable revenue stream by linking to their Patreon page, where the supporters can pay a monthly fee or receive more content and suggest new solos to be transcribed. Through these platforms, transcribers claim a role as a co-creator by requesting a fair share for their labor, contrasting the previous ways musicians bought transcriptions. For example, Charlie Parker Omnibook, a popular transcription publication, does not credit its transcriber and lists Charlie Parker as the singular author, while containing an introduction by Jamie Aebersold, whom we may infer to be one of the transcribers. A collection of transcriptions called Bebop Piano Legends, published in 2017 by Hall Leonard, does not cite the transcriber anywhere in the book. On its cover, it looks like the book is trying to convince the consumers that we don't need to know who transcribed the solos because they're just, quote, note-for-note jazz piano transcriptions as played by classic jazz pianists, unquote. In the cover of these published transcriptions, you will often find a short statement that reassures the buyers that this is the same music that you have heard just in a notated form. A note is a note, whether it is in a sonic form or in a written form, right? Of course, the answer is no. Turning improvisation into notation is not an automatic process, contrary to what these marketing phrases lead us to think. As Peter Winkler writes, even the most scrupulously detailed transcription is full of guesses, suppositions, and arbitrary decisions. End quote. The gap between the recorded sound and notation is filled with transcribers' creative interpretation, which makes a transcription, quote, an analytic act that says as much about the transcriber's experience of transcribed object as it does about the music being transcribed, end quote. In this regard, a transcriber is as much a creator of the transcription as the improviser is. Minimizing or omitting the transcribers in the published transcription is, therefore, problematic. The publisher's intention to diminish the work of transcribers is understandable. The publishing company has the upper hand in determining how the transcribers are compensated for their work. If the work is deemed less significant, it'll cost less for the company to hire the workers. In addition, from the marketing standpoint, the potential buyer make a purchasing decision based on the improviser's name rather than the transcriber. Since published transcription pretend to provide a direct link to the improvisers, if the transcribers are granted more agencies, this link will become weaker. Copyright law also plays a role. Even though a transcription's copyright can be protected as a derivative work, if it is commissioned by a company, the authorship goes to the company as being a work made for hire. These YouTube channels, therefore, lay bare the publisher's interest in diminishing the labor of the transcribers by presenting the transcription as a mere change of medium, from recording to notation, as well as the inadequacy of the current copyright law. Putting litigious history and economic interest aside, I would like to focus on the epistemological ground upon which these earlier practices were able to stand. In other words, what kind of assumptions do we bring when we encounter transcriptions, which made it possible for us to diminish or hide the work of transcribers? I argue that the answer lies in the problematic ontology of musical mediums. Musical mediums such as LPs, CDs, audio files, and scores are treated as containers of music, while music in its essential form is immaterial. In this view, the work of transcribers does not fundamentally change the musical essence, and therefore can be disregarded without much consequence if one wants to, say, learn how to improvise in the style of Chick Corea. I will call this the idealist view. The idealist view is prevalent in music theoretical literature because treating a musical work as a stable object makes the analytical investigation of it possible in the first place. For example, Steve Larson treats composition as, quote, putting together musical elements and storing them, whether in a memory, notation, or sound recording media, end quote. An idealist conception considers improvisation as a product of improviser's cognitive function. Any material that did not originate from the improviser's mind is therefore considered as external to improvisation. This is how Jeff Pressing portrays free improvisation. It is free of external inputs, one of which is the referent. He writes, quote, if no referent is present, or if it is devised in real time, we speak of free or absolute improvisation, end quote. An alternative is the materialist view, where the performance's documentation is itself considered as creative act. As philosopher Peggy Phelan writes, once a performance is recorded, quote, it becomes something other than performance, end quote. A live performance, its recording, and the recording's transcription are three different objects of independent creative entity. Each medium, in other words, implicates the improvisation with a different message, to borrow Marshall McLuhan's motto. This view erases the conceptual border around improvisation as the only manifestation of creativity and considers improvisation's dissemination as a continuation of creative instances. The improviser no longer holds control over improvisation's authority, signaling the death of the improviser. The materialist view of improvisation echoes a noise artist Mattin's observation that, quote, the practice of improvisation in itself questions the foundation upon which intellectual property is based, end quote. The materialist view is grounded upon a conceptualization that is entirely different from that of idealist view. The idealist view enacts the conceptual metaphor, sounds are objects, which stem from, quote, projecting our experience of physical object categories onto our experience of certain sounds, end quote. It is because we conceptualize improvisation as a combination of two or more objects that we can separate the referent and medium from the improvisation. Pressing's heuristic classification of selected artistic tradition on the basis of improvisation content shows this assumption clearly. Because referent and improvisation are thought of as objects with solid edges, we can quantify their amount in these artistic expressions. To conceptualize the materialist view of improvisation, we need to enact a different metaphor, sound as water. This metaphor is adopted from ancient Chinese documents, as Sarah Allen observes that water was one of three root metaphors in ancient Chinese thought. Our physical experience of interacting with water, particularly its ability to be blended with different types of liquid, can be activated when conceptualizing improvisation. Just like the mixture of soy sauce and vinegar creates a delicious sauce for dumpling, and just like once these two ingredients are mixed together, we cannot separate the two afterward, the referent, medium, and improvisation are mixed and cannot be separated once created. There is no singular ideal object that transcends the different manifestations of improvisation. Instead, each manifestation resembles each other while being a separate object. These material objects create what Wittgenstein calls a network of similarities instead. To the extent that the musician's bodily engagement is taken into the account of analysis of music, I consider the recent theories of embodiment in music as one of many ways to situate improvisation within a materialist context. By reconceptualizing improvisation's relationship with the referent and medium, we can find new ways to describe how improvisation makes sense to us. Thank you.